I never thought I would be humiliated in front of my neighbors. But it happened. And it happened in broad daylight, right in the middle of that month's HOA meeting. She stood up straight. Her voice was cold as steel. She pointed at me like I was some criminal who had just snuck into the neighborhood. Then she said, "You're a pile of garbage, and we'll deal with you the way people deal with trash." The whole room went silent. I felt like the air froze for a few seconds. All eyes were on me. Some people turned away, some looked down. No one defended me. No one said a word. I wanted to say something. I really did. But my throat tightened, not because I was ashamed, but because I was angry. I didn't speak up then, but I swore deep inside she just made the biggest mistake of her life. Karen, yes, her real name was Karen, was the new HOA president of our neighborhood. No one elected her. No one wanted her. She simply declared herself president after the previous one moved away. From that moment on, life became a little hell for anyone she didn't like, and I was clearly one of them. She held up a stack of papers, thick, color-printed, even professionally bound. On the cover, in big bold letters, severe violation report, enforcement notice. She looked straight at me and pronounced every word. "You have 7 days to remove the non-compliant property from your yard. If not, we have the right to proceed with seizure." The property she was talking about? It was a small camper I had refurbished myself, neatly parked in the back corner of my yard, behind a wooden fence. It didn't bother anyone. It didn't block anything. It didn't make noise. But to Karen, it was an aesthetic hazard. And according to her, proof that I disrespected the community. I didn't respond to her that day. I just looked her in the eyes, then turned around and walked out of the meeting room. But I knew I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. I used to be someone who tolerated things. Used to think, forget it, not worth the trouble. But when someone dares to stand in front of the whole community, point at you and call you garbage, when someone threatens to seize your property just because they don't like you, that's no longer an HOA issue. That's a matter of justice. That's a line, a boundary you cannot let others cross. And this time, I decided I would stand up. I moved to this neighborhood nearly 2 years ago, not because the housing prices were cheap, not because the scenery was stunning, but for one simple reason: peace and quiet. I used to live in a big city, honking horns, traffic jams, endless meetings. I'm a programmer. I work remotely. All I need is Wi-Fi and coffee. After a family tragedy, I realized I needed a fresh start, somewhere not too crowded, not too close to a supermarket, someplace where people weren't too nosy. That's how I found this place. A small community, nestled among pine forests and winding roads. People call it Hollow Pine Meadows. Sounds a bit pretentious, but hey, names don't matter. The house I bought was old-fashioned, red brick, gray roof, French-style windows. Old but solid. I spent 6 months fixing it up, piece by piece. Painted the walls myself, laid down hardwood floors myself. Even built a wooden fence in the backyard, just high enough to shield the camper I parked there. That camper isn't a toy. It's something I kept from my last road trips with my father before he passed. I keep it as a memento. On some weekends, I climb inside, brew a cup of coffee, open an old map, and relive the memories. I never thought it was bothering anyone. The neighbors were friendly at first. The old man to my left greeted me every morning. The young couple to the right even brought over baked goods to welcome me. I thought I had found the perfect place to live. Until Karen showed up. Karen wasn't the original HOA leader. The previous president was Mrs. Jean. Kind, reasonable, and someone who understood the line between regulations and personal life. But after Mrs. Jean moved to another state, Karen suddenly declared herself the interim acting president. No election. No vote of confidence. Just an email sent to the whole neighborhood with the subject line, "Urgent Announcement, HOA Leadership Reorganization." From that moment on, everything changed. Within weeks, the HOA went from a group of residents discussing trash schedules and streetlight repairs to a full-on control board. They started sending out violation warnings like spam mail, measuring grass height in inches, checking whether paint colors matched the official codes, sniffing for unauthorized material odors. I still have no idea what that means. And me, with my camper tucked neatly behind a fence, became the target. At first, I let it go. One fine notice for non-operational vehicle. I thought it was a mistake. Then another, and another. All three bore the same signature: Karen L. Morris, acting president, Hollow Pine HOA. I still thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But when she pointed at me during the meeting and called me garbage, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Not because of the camper, not because of the warning letters, but because of the insult. Because of the way she abused a made-up title to intimidate, to humiliate, and to turn this place from a home into a prison. And I, someone who once fled the city to find peace, was now forced to become the opposition. Karen wants to turn this whole neighborhood into her personal kingdom? Fine. But I'm not playing by her rules. I'm playing by the real law. Do you know what it feels like to be watched? In your own yard? I used to think people complaining about HOA snooping were exaggerating, until I became the one receiving violation notices. 3 weeks in a row. The first time, I got a thick envelope. Inside was a violation notice. Reason? Front yard grass exceeds 4 inches per surveillance footage from community monitoring device. I was stunned. I had just mowed the lawn the day before. It had rained that day. I measured it. The highest spot was 3.5 inches. I was sure of it. The following week, another letter came. Rear vehicle, unregistered for use, must be removed from premises within 72 hours. It was the camper. Again, I remembered the original HOA regulations. RVs were only restricted if parked in front of the house for more than 14 days. Mine was behind a fence. You couldn't even see it, unless you were trying to. And then came the third letter. This time, there was no polite language, repeated violations, property deemed severely non-compliant, subject to administrative action. Enforcement will proceed if cooperation is not met. Attached was a photo, taken from above, clearly from a drone. Karen had deployed a drone to surveil my backyard. I stepped onto my porch and looked around. It was 7 a.m., and I saw her, Karen, standing on the curb, arms full of files, staring at my house like she was inspecting a military base. She saw me, didn't flinch, didn't smile, just gave a slight nod, and turned away. Cold, as if to say, I control this neighborhood, and I know what you're doing. A few days later, a sign appeared in front of my house. It was staked into the ground with metal rods. Bright red letters on a white background, property in non-compliance, HOA enforcement in progress. It felt like a public punishment, a daylight humiliation. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Some whispered behind my back. Kids stopped kicking their soccer balls across my yard. I started to feel isolated, all because of one woman and a seat she appointed herself to. I sent an official email in response, explained everything clearly, included photos of the lawn, camper registration, and a scanned copy of the HOA bylaws. No reply. 1 week, then 2. That's when I decided I was going to the HOA meeting. I don't like those kinds of meetings. Too many people crammed into a small hall, stiff plastic chairs, the air always awkward and heavy. Karen sat at the head of the table. In front of her, a microphone, a glass water pitcher, and a stack of papers, always violation notices. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up. I didn't even get to say a word before she cut me off. You're the guy with the camper, right? House number 42? I nodded. She looked around like she was addressing Congress. This man is exactly why we need stricter measures. His property is a visual threat to the entire neighborhood. If everyone parked campers behind their homes, this place would turn into a parking lot, wouldn't it? I stood there, silent. Karen looked me straight in the eye and said it, "You're a pile of garbage and we'll deal with you like trash." I don't remember how I walked out of that room. I just remember my heart pounding, fists clenched, and my head cold as stone. Not from fear, but because I knew she had just made a big mistake. You can insult me in private. You can send me letters. But when you publicly shame me, distort the rules, and fabricate unlawful enforcement orders, you're no longer in the gray zone. You've crossed the line. And I, the man who once just wanted a quiet life, now had to become the one who stands up. Karen thinks she's in charge, but I'm going to show her. The law isn't something you make up. It's something you use to stop people like her. That night, I didn't sleep. I brewed coffee at 10 p.m., not to stay awake, but to stop myself from boiling over. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and typed, Hollow Pine HOA bylaws, original filing. Not the version Karen sent. I wanted the original, the one stamped by the county, the version filed with the clerk's office when this neighborhood was first established. It took me nearly an hour to find it. A blurry PDF scan of an old paper copy, 34 pages, faded, but legally binding. I began to read, line by line, clause by clause, comma by comma, and I realized the enforcement authority Karen kept citing didn't exist in the original bylaws. There was no mention of the HOA being allowed to seize property, no clause permitting them to place non-compliance signs on someone's lawn. And most importantly, there was absolutely no provision allowing someone to appoint themselves HOA president without a vote. I checked my old emails. I found the one Karen sent last year when she declared herself president. The first sentence read, according to section 12.4 of the bylaws, in the event of resignation, the board member with the longest residency may assume interim leadership. Sounded official. Just one problem. The original bylaws only go up to section 9. There is no section 12.4. She made it up. I began taking notes. I printed the original bylaws. I highlighted every contradiction between the real version and the one Karen always quoted. Then I reopened the violation letters, checked the fonts, the logos, the formatting. Not a single one had a case number. No county seal, no official validation whatsoever. And then I did what any responsible American citizen should do. I called a lawyer. Small office, 2 rooms, 1 assistant, and an old dog sleeping under the desk. But this guy had spent 12 years in real estate law and had handled 5 HOA-related lawsuits. I told him everything, showed him the documents. He looked at me and gave a small smile. You've opened a deep hole, but the good news is you're standing at the edge, not at the bottom. He guided me through drafting a formal letter, certified mail, addressed to the HOA board. Simple contents: a request to verify the legality of all issued violation letters, a demand for documentation on how the HOA president was appointed, a comparison of the original bylaws with the currently enforced version. I included a copy of the original bylaws I had found. I signed the letter, sent it, kept the receipt. A week passed, no response. 2 weeks, still silence. But I wasn't idle. I bought a mini body cam with a mic and clipped it to my shirt during the next HOA meeting. I recorded the entire session. I also installed a ring cam at my front door to capture everything that happened on my porch. She didn't know it, but I was building a case. Every word she said, every action she took, every false directive. One time, I saw her speaking to a neighbor in front of my house. The ring cam picked up every word clearly. Guys like him don't get it unless you push. If one cleanup notice doesn't work, just take the damn house. I saved the video onto a USB. Named it evidencekaren01.mp4. I was no longer the silent one. No longer the guy with the camper in the backyard. I was becoming the one preparing for a counterattack. And this time, no one would stand in a meeting room and call me garbage ever again. Karen thinks she's playing a control game, but I'm playing chess, and I'm ready to move my queen. I arrived at the HOA meeting 15 minutes early. In my hand was a file bag. Inside were 3 printed copies of the original HOA bylaws, 4 violation letters filled with typos, a USB drive containing recordings, videos, and even aerial drone photos taken illegally from over my yard. And most importantly, a formal petition to challenge the HOA president, signed by 12 households, enough to trigger a re-election under state law. The meeting room was unusually crowded that evening. I figured the rumors had already spread. Karen was the same as always, dark blue blazer, eyes scanning the crowd like she was above everyone. On the table in front of her was that same old folder, what she always called internal regulations. The meeting began as usual. Agenda items breezed by like nobody cared. Financial report, lawn maintenance plans, streetlight repairs on corner 3. Then came the final item, resident comments. I raised my hand. Karen looked at me and smirked. We allow 5 minutes per speaker. I nodded. 5 minutes is all I need. I stepped forward, placed the file bag on the table, took out the 3 bylaw copies and handed them to each board member. Karen frowned. I began. My name is Daniel Reed, resident of House 42. This past month, I received 3 HOA violation letters and had a non-compliance sign planted in my yard. I'm here to prove that all of it is legally invalid. The room went quiet. I opened the bylaws. Section 3.2, property seizure, not authorized. Section 5.1, all enforcement actions must be voted on by the board, which never happened. And most importantly, the original document ends at Section 9. There is no Section 12.4 that the HOA president used to justify her appointment. Karen interrupted. You have no right to question this organization. I looked her straight in the eyes. I do, and I'm not alone. I raised the petition, signed by 12 households, handed it to the board secretary. According to the Minnesota State Residence Act, if 10 or more homeowners request a re-election, the board is required to conduct it within 30 days. The atmosphere shifted. People started whispering. But I wasn't finished. I plugged in the USB, played the video from my Ring cam. Karen, standing in the street, saying clearly, "If one cleanup order doesn't work, just take the house." Then I played the recording from the previous meeting, where she called me a pile of garbage. The audio was crystal clear, no edits. A woman in the back spoke up, "You can't talk to a neighbor like that." Another voice, "Karen, we need an explanation." Karen started to lose her composure. Her voice trembled as she said, "This is a personal attack. All of this is a distortion of facts." I calmly responded, "I didn't distort anything. It's your voice, your signature, and your invented rules that speak for themselves." No one clapped. No one shouted. Just a heavy silence, the kind that happens when truth becomes too clear to deny. Karen sat down. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The meeting ended with a vote to proceed with a re-election. The secretary recorded the minutes. One board member leaned over and whispered, "We should have done this a long time ago." I left the room in silence. Not out of pride, but because I knew justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to show up. And that night, it did. Karen thought she held absolute power, but no one stands above the law. No one has the right to call others trash, then write fake rules to justify cruelty. 3 weeks after that meeting, a new election was held. No fanfare, no drama, just a simple ballot mailed to every household. This time, everything followed proper procedure. No fake clauses, no violation letters, no threats. Karen was voted out by an almost unanimous margin. I didn't celebrate. I didn't jump for joy like in a TV drama. I simply took down the property in non-compliance sign that had stood in front of my house for nearly 2 months, removed each nail one by one. Each nail reminded me that every moment of silence is a hammer driving deeper into our own freedom. The camper was still there, tucked behind the fence, quiet, peaceful, just like me. After everything, the new HOA president was an older woman, Linda, someone who had remained silent through many past meetings. After the day I stood up, she came to my door, knocked, and said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, but you reminded me that silence is also a choice, and sometimes it's the wrong one." We had tea on the porch that day. For the first time in months, I felt this place was truly home. Neighbors started being friendly again. Morning nods, laughter of children in the afternoons. No one mentioned Karen anymore. She moved out, quietly. No one said goodbye. I kept a copy of the original HOA bylaws slipped inside a plastic sleeve, not to wave it in anyone's face, but to remind myself rules exist to protect people, not to control them. Titles don't create integrity. Behavior defines authority. Sometimes I still climb into the camper, sit there, crack the small window open, let the sunlight stream in, do nothing at all, except breathe. Because I know every fight must come to an end. And if you stood up for the right reasons, you don't need a grand victory. You just need to reclaim the peace that was stolen from you. She called me trash. But in the end, it was she who was swept away by the illusion of power she built for herself. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth. And I let the truth do the rest. So if you're hearing this story, if you've ever been insulted, pushed around, or threatened by someone clinging to a title no one gave them, remember this. You're not alone. You don't have to stay silent. And you don't need to be a lawyer to stand up for what's right. You just need to start with one word: no. I'm not telling this story to be called brave. I'm not telling it to become the neighborhood hero. I'm telling it because I know there are so many others out there going through what I once went through. Maybe you've never been called trash in a public meeting, but maybe you've been quietly humiliated through a ridiculous letter, through whispers behind your back, through the condescending look of someone who thinks they're above the law. Maybe you don't own a camper, but you do own the right to peace in your own home. And no one has the right to take that away under the guise of some fake authority. I chose not to stay silent, not because I was strong, but because I didn't want to look in the mirror the next morning and see someone who knew they were right, but chose to look away. What about you? If one day the HOA or any organization knocks on your door at 7 a.m. with a rule book they just made up, what will you do? Will you stay quiet and hope it goes away? Or will you open that door, stand tall, and ask, is this real law? Or just fake power someone made up to control me? If you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever been pushed into a corner by people hiding behind a title to bully you, share your story down in the comments. Because you never know, your story might give strength to someone who's afraid, someone who's hesitating, someone who just needs a reason to stand up. And if you think this story is worth spreading, hit like, hit subscribe, or simply send it to someone who needs to hear this. Because sometimes change starts with one small voice saying, no, that's enough. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.